Welcome on in to the Full Court Press. Jason Walker here with Eric Frandsen on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM The Fan. Streaming online at 1069thefan.com and on the 1069 The Fan mobile app. Also streaming live on YouTube. The Fan KLGN is where you can find us, watch our faces, our lovely faces. Hello.
Yes, always lovely.
Always lovely. I'm still wearing my blue light glasses. I usually take those off for the show so people don't think I'm some kind of four eyes like Eric.
Oh, wow. Shots fired.
Well, our today's show is going to be shortened a little bit. We've got 1 hour on the radio waves. But at 5 p.m., we're going to hand things off to Westwood One. That's who it is, right?
Yeah,
Westwood One.
They'll be full play-by-play coverage of the NCAA Tournament.
Yeah, so Sweet 16 games starting tonight, so you can hear those on the Fan. If you want to stick with us, we'll be having a little bit of content. I don't think we're going to go a full second hour, but we'll be sticking around. We've got a few more topics than we can fit in 1 hour, so we're going to be on the YouTube stream a little longer than we are on the radio. And I think we'll just kind of bolt on the extra stuff we do to the podcast feed. So those of you listening on the podcast feed, you should be fine. You can just listen as you normally do. So however you're listening, watching, however you're following us, we're glad you can tag along. And if you want to chime in on any of the conversations we're having, you can text 435-339-0321. That's our Young Power Sports Logan text line. And let's get started right away with kind of the big news. I was planning on leading the show with something else. I was setting up, the live stream like thumbnail and setting up all the show planning. We were going to kind of maybe lead with some Bronco Mendenhall stuff because we went and talked to him after practice at noon today.
Yeah.
So you will hear that audio. But then while we were sitting there waiting for practice to get over, news broke that Utah State men's basketball forward Karson Templin is intending to enter the transfer portal. He's not like officially entered the portal, but for all intents and purposes, Karson Templin is now in the transfer portal. And that kind of ends up being the biggest news of the day for Aggie Nation. As the sixth man of the year in the Mountain West, and for all intents and purposes, your top center on the team, where he was playing center more minutes than Zach Keller or Gary Clark. I think he was, he was sixth in minutes, but among bigs, he was getting the most minutes. Colby King was fifth in minutes on the team. But Karson Templin was getting more minutes than Gary Clark, more minutes than the guy who was the starter, Zach Keller. And he was usually the one closing the game. So essentially, your de facto starting center leaving or potentially leaving in the transfer portal after a really nice junior season where he was really just continuing to take steps. We've seen him take steps every single year, and this year was, it's not quite the culmination of his career, not quite the peak of Karson Templin, but getting pretty close to it.
Yeah, he's always been one of my favorite guys to watch, just his activity level. He's always out there scrapping for everything. He may not be the most refined and most talented, but he certainly is one of the most hardest working players that I've seen. And that's been kind of his superpower, if you will. But he has refined his game. I don't mean to discredit his offensive ability because he has worked on it. Like before, his freshman season, it was only hustle plays. If he got any points, it's because he was hustling and he was near the basket. But as he has progressed, he has gotten better and better offensively. And I think he's become more disciplined defensively. He's a guy that a lot of teams would love to have on their roster. But the thing we have to remember and not overly freak out about is just because a player says they're intending to put their name in the portal does not necessarily mean they are on the way out the door.
Yeah.
Now, Blake Anderson had a thing that if you put your name in the portal, you were gone. Didn't matter. And I always felt like that was kind of immature. And because there are a lot of players who they're, for a variety of reasons, it makes sense for them to see what's out there and see what's best for them moving forward. And there are plenty of cases where guys put their names in the portal, kind of survey the field, and then realize, you know what, it's best for me if I just stay put. And because for Karson Templin, he doesn't know who the next head coach is going to be. He doesn't know how he fits into that system. There are other programs that are going to be throwing a lot of money his way, and maybe that makes more sense to him. Maybe he wants to explore staying with Jared Calhoun, or maybe he wants to get back to his home state of Texas. Who knows? There'll be a variety of different things that are motivating a player to declare that they intend to enter the portal. Again, portal doesn't officially open again for like another week and a half.
Yeah, and I know with Blake Anderson, the whole, enter the portal, that means you're leaving. I mean, even for him, there was an exception to that. I think it was a running back. I forget which one, but there was a running back who entered the portal and came back. I think it was Faison. I'm not 100% sure. Although I think he ended up leaving in the portal later anyway in a different offseason. But even with like the coaching change, like when Blake Anderson arrived, he tried to pull players out of the portal, was successful in pulling
Devin Tompkins.
Yeah, Devin Tompkins. That was kind of the most well-known name there. Is he got him back out of the portal. And we've seen Utah State players enter the portal before and come back. Both Mason Falslev and Ian Martinez went into the portal. As Jared Calhoun was coming here, both of them came out of the portal. I think there was another player who went into the portal and came back out. Like we've seen in basketball, guys enter the portal and then come back. San Diego State, I think, had 2 or 3 of them that did that last year.
Yep.
So players have entered the portal, or in some cases, they're also, putting their name in the NBA draft and things like that, and then they'll come back. And in a time where there's a transition with the basketball coach, you need to be figuring out all your options as soon as possible. And we talk about this with the transfer portal, and it's the reason why players are putting their name in, effectively putting their name in the portal right now, where they don't wait until April 7th to announce they're going. They announce the second that they feel, comfortable doing it, usually at the end of their team season. They do it then because they want to be, hearing from coaches. They want coaches to reach out to them. They want to figure out as many options. They want to gauge their value, gauge their options, and do that as soon as possible. So while there is an aspect of wait to make your decision until you meet the head coach, and until you get a feel for what the program is, talk to that coach, see what their vision is, see what their style is. Does, if you're an athlete, you ask yourself, does my play style and my talents fit within this system? Because that is a very important thing for a player, because you can be a good player and your talents just don't fit that system. I mean, look at Isaac Johnson.
Yeah.
That was a player who at Oregon and at Utah State,
case.
His talents and his, what he had just was not fitting, was not clicking with. So like 3 different head coaches. He goes to Hawaii. I know there's also an aspect of transferring down, but still he goes there and has his best season and showcase the talents that he clearly has that just weren't showing up under different head coaches. So as a player, you're trying to figure that out. Does my game fit within this system? You look at how that can be positive for a guy like MJ Collins, was playing at a Power 5 level, comes to Utah State, the system fits like a glove, and he averages 17.5 points per game. So as a player, that's something that you're considering. And obviously it can be tough to gauge that without actually playing under the system, but at least you can talk with the coach about that. So that's something that you're going to want to wait to make your final decision. But that doesn't mean you can't begin exploring other options. Have those same conversations with other coaches who may have recruited you when you were a freshman, coaches that, teams that you may have seen who may suddenly reach out to you, or frankly, who may have been tampering with you in previous off seasons. But you can have those conversations with other coaches and begin getting that feedback from them. And then you also talk with the new Utah State head coach, have that conversation with him, and at that point, begin that final decision-making process. So it makes sense for basically every single Utah State player that has eligibility left to put their name out publicly into the transfer portal. Again, even though it's before the portal has opened, put your name out there. Begin having those conversations. Go, talk to Utah State's new head coach, whoever that may be, and begin that decision-making process. So honestly, if I were advising the Utah State players, I know for Utah State fans, they don't want any of their players to enter the portal, but if I was personally advising any of them, put your name in the portal. For the good of yourself, figure out your options. And that's why I would be very surprised if Mason Falslev doesn't put his name in the portal in the very near future here. Heck, he may be doing it during the show, and knowing how news always manages to break while we're talking about it. Or more accurately, it'll happen at like 6 p.m. tonight.
Yeah, as soon as we get off. We've said this before, and every fan of every college team everywhere just has to come to the realization that as the season concludes, when their team's season is finally done, you should assume everyone who has eligibility left is going to be in the portal. And we can try to stand on a hill and preach loyalty and get on soapboxes as much as we want, but it's a different world now. And it's, in a lot of these players, it is in their best interest to at least see what's out there and what makes sense for them and their family situation and for their future as well. Would we love that fewer players move? I don't think it's as good for their mental health to be moving as much as they do. But sometimes you have to move because of your mental health, because maybe you feel stuck and situation just isn't good for you. So there'll be any number of reasons why somebody puts their name out there. But fans shouldn't overreact. Fans shouldn't be going after Karson Templin and finding him on social media and calling him a traitor or whatever, or going after him. Like, give the man his space.
Yeah, and thankfully, I think most fan bases that I've seen have matured in that sense. I've not seen any negativity toward Templin. I don't know if you have, but fans I think they're mature enough now to begin to realize the process of the transfer portal and to be grateful to the players, or to at least thank them, even if they're disappointed. Aggie fans want Karson Templin to stay, but thankfully, I don't think that there are hordes of Aggie fans going after Templin negatively.
Yeah, and I don't think I've seen very much of that. But what I have seen is people like, "Oh, thanks for all your time at Utah State. Best of luck wherever you end up." That's not a foregone conclusion. Don't say goodbye, because he's not gone. So let's give them, encourage him to stick around if he can. Extol all the virtues of staying at Utah State if you want. That's great. And how he could go down as an Aggie legend. But don't be surprised if there are more guys who are on this roster who declare their intentions.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of guys. I know I mentioned Mason and Karson as the guys most likely to stay, but that was never a guarantee that they were going to stay. So guys like Mason, Elijah Perryman, Adlan Elmine, like, honestly, those are most of your key guys that have eligibility to begin with.
By the way, happy birthday, Adlan Elmine.
Oh, is it his birthday?
Yeah.
Oh, well, happy birthday, Adlan.
Yeah.
So all the Aggie fans watching can go wish Adlan Elmine a happy birthday.
Yes.
To know that he feels loved by the Aggie community. But yeah, expect a lot of these players to enter the transfer portal. You had guys who redshirted last year. Red shirts, it's weirdly hard to keep guys who redshirt, especially after a coaching change, because, like, is the new coach even going to want me? Utah State, right as the portal era was really kicking off, did have two players who redshirted that did stay and play the next season. That was Mason and Isaac Johnson. But like, a lot of the red shirts recently have redshirted and then left. And that happens to a lot of teams. You redshirt, you think, okay, we're going to develop and you're going to come back next year, and then suddenly they're not there next year. And especially that can be made a lot worse, because usually with a red shirt and then trying to develop next year is you get recruited over the next incoming freshman, the next batch of transfer portal guys. That can be a trick. But then with a new coaching staff who's going to have their own recruits that they're looking at, they're, the high school recruits they try and drag with them from their previous stop to maybe get them to open up their commitment, recommit to the new school. Their incoming transfers.
Yep.
Like, granted, Braden Bowe, David Weezy, and King Santosi should be talented enough to stick around at Utah State no matter who the next head coach is. But those players were also recruited by Calhoun. They may end up following him to Cincinnati. Elamine and Perryman could end up following Calhoun to Cincinnati since, again, freshmen who are recruited by him and obviously are very talented players. So, yeah, we'll see what other players or whichever players enter their name in the transfer portal. But I can tell you right now, Karson Templin may be the first, but he will not be the last.
Right.
So we'll just keep an eye on that. We're going to take a break, a bit of an earlier break for our first segment. When we come back, we'll shift gears. We're going to play the interview that we had with Bronco Mendenhall, post-practice interview with the Utah State football head coach, his thoughts on spring ball so far, and a bunch of other topics. That's coming up next here on the Full Court Press. Welcome back to the Full Court Press. Reminder, indoor air in our area can be up to 5 times dirtier than outdoor air, especially during the dry winter months. Dry air keeps dust and allergens floating longer, sending them deeper into your lungs and making sickness more likely. Mountain Valley Heating and Air installs high-efficiency steam humidifiers that use 1 gallon of water with no waste to improve air quality. Call 435-753-5170 for a free in-home air quality assessment from Mountain Valley Heating and Air. Going to the Young Power Sports of Logan text line real quick, 8632 saying the scenarios around KT and Mason are different. Mason's number will be in the rafters if he stays. KT will just be remembered fondly. Which is, I think that's true.
Yeah, you're right.
Because the difference, between Mason and Karson is essentially imagine the difference between Sam Merrill and Taylor Funk. Funk being maybe even a little more than Funk just because Funk was here for 1 year. Karson would have been here for 4 years, but like Taylor Funk is beloved by the Aggie fan base. Just think of any, Diogo Brito. Like those guys, Diogo's over in Europe, so he's not been as involved, boots on the ground, where Taylor Funk has been at like multiple Aggie games, but he's in America, Brito's playing internationally, so it's tricky that way. But yeah, you're talking about the difference between an all-timer and a beloved player. So yeah, for Karson, like I think there's still an aspect of wanting to be, you could want to be an Aggie lifer, but keep in mind, like, it's a little easier for Mason to be like, hey, I can be a program legend. And for Karson, I can be well regarded, or I can get a really, go to a coach that he has a great relationship with likely and get a lot of money. He's only got 1 more year left to make a lot of money, and he's not been making nearly as much as he could have.
Yeah, he's been underpaid for sure. Yeah, based on his impact on the court. 9938
saying, to all USU basketball players, go get paid, if at USU or elsewhere.
Yeah, there's a chance you can get some money here at Utah State. It will pay more than some institutions will, but there are other institutions that'll throw money at some of these players that Utah State cannot compete with. So, yeah, it's a different world.
All right, so let's turn our attention toward Utah State football. Nobody entering the portal there. They can't enter the portal.
No.
The next portal doesn't happen until December, technically January, or I forget when it happens with football these days. But we talked with Utah State football head coach Bronco Mendenhall after their practice. It ended at noon. And after they had a really long post-practice conversation, we were able to talk with them, talk with Bronco Mendenhall for about 13 minutes or so about a variety of topics, how things are going, and a couple other miscellaneous topics, including the series with the University of Utah. So here's that from Bronco Mendenhall.
That in there. So yeah, if I just give you, or if you could give us just some feedback on how spring has gone so far. I know you had the winter workouts, but now you've been running drills with the guys now for a little while. Just assessment of how things have progressed so far.
Yeah, we just finished practice number 6 today for spring. As most people know, you get 15 practices, and there's some regulations on what kind of gear you can wear, etc. And spring's a really unique time now in the world of college football. I would say many rosters have replaced more than 50% of their team already, knowing there's only one transfer portal window now. And so the team building and the onboarding process and bringing folks together is at an accelerated rate. Sometimes that happened before, after the summer and through fall camp, where a lot of your team were coming as first-year players and arriving then. A lot of high school players now are graduating early and arriving in December also. So lots going on. Certainly we're practicing schemes and strategy and football and technical and tactical work, but there's also, lots of team building, culture work, relationship building, and program emphasis at the same time. So it's really kind of a different time. It feels somewhat like spring practice and somewhat like fall camp at the same time. Having said that, a powerful indicator now, I think, in college football is how many players were retained on any given team. And for those players, for us that started 13 games a year ago, their reference point in the program is clearly accelerated and beyond new players coming. New players that have started or played significant amounts elsewhere are a little farther along than those maybe that have just been practice players elsewhere. And then we have freshmen that arrive mid-year. And so there's really different levels of players coming into spring practice. And that's becoming more cohesive each and every practice. It's becoming more execution sound each and every practice. The camaraderie, the execution, the belief, the program development, the program design, all those things are really strong. And I feel great about where we are. And clearly accelerated further than a year ago at this time. What I just explained were some of the challenges that I think that are going on around college football. But I really like our team. I like the depth. I like the camaraderie. I like the competitive spirit. And I like really the progress that we've made.
So when you look at, spring ballers, talk about depth chart and position battles, like how much do you really end up knowing about that kind of stuff in spring ball?
Yeah. So I think more often than not, you can have a great idea at this point under this structure with one transfer portal window with not as many high school players coming in the summer. So the answer has to include all that. More so than ever before, spring will help determine fall depth, and probably more accurately than ever because fewer players are arriving, in the summer, and fewer with experience. So really most teams are seeing what they're going to have right now. And now there's a delicate trade-off there for accelerating your team and driving and grinding and pushing, which we all want to do, and then maintaining health, because any injuries that happen in the spring, man, that's tough to get them back ready for the fall, and that impacts why they're here anyway. And so there's a delicate balance in there. But the depth will be pretty clear for most teams, I would say, across the country by the end of spring. Not perfectly clear, but pretty clear.
Earlier this year, you said you and the coaching staff were excited about this quarterback room. How do you feel now, 6 practices in?
I really like our quarterback room. Robert and I, our offensive coordinator, he is, I think, just shocked at the health of the room. So certainly with McKay Hillstead, there's age and there is experience, meaning older and some college starts and being a backup, and there's super value in that. And then Grady coming from the University of Virginia, and that's a seasoned and older player. And then someone that's won a 6A state championship in Texas football. That's impressive, and that's as a freshman coming in. Another walk-on player, Crew, a quarterback here from in-state, a great athlete also, and still another quarterback coming. I like the succession plan. I like the experience. I like the ability. I like the athleticism. And yeah, probably as healthy of starting point for a program that I've ever taken over, not only in maybe with a clear player that could be the starter, but with what the succession and the depth looks like. So it's probably one of the strongest positions on our team, which if you need to have one, that's the one you want to start with.
You mentioned Robert and I, just how is he integrating here in this culture and this team, and kind of picking up and still coaching at a high level with you?
We've coached together for 15 years. I mean, it's as if we started, or we just stopped at Virginia yesterday and we just started. There's no lag time. There's no warm up. There's no reconnecting. It's as if it was Virginia was Wednesday and today's Thursday, and we started again. And so, Robert spent some time at Syracuse and helped them return to postseason and had a good run at North Carolina State. Already the identity, the competitive spirit, the knowledge, the use of personnel. I can complete his sentences and vice versa. He knows the expectations and the speed. It just is, it's as if, so some in the community or elsewhere in college football say new coordinator. That just means they haven't done any research. It's probably it might be the longest tenured head coach / offensive coordinator combination that exists in college football. I don't know. I haven't researched it, but it's got to be top 5, top 10 for sure that's going on right now. And I know he's 67. I'm 60 now. So that alone, it's going to be hard to match those years together.
Talk about the quarterback, the depth chart. McKay, obviously coming here, you talk about how he wants to be a starter. Have you seen him kind of take control early on in spring ball?
Yeah, certainly just because his starting point is further along. Grady is next furthest along, again, coming from Virginia. They're just older. They're more seasoned, and that helps. It really does. So it doesn't mean youth can't catch up. It doesn't mean youth can't be the starter. It doesn't mean youth is eliminated. But when you say reference points and where they begin, it's not equal. I'm not talking about is the race equal or is the competition equal. They're just not arriving at the same point. And so it will play out, but that's the same at any position. Man, experience matters.
Last year, the offensive line was one of the points of the game where you guys struggled. Yep. How do you feel that you've been able to kind of replenish that position this offseason and then 6 practices in? Yeah,
I feel really good about the players we added, and certainly it was a point of emphasis and an area that needed to be worked on and needs to be worked on. And And I think we did a nice job addressing that. Now bringing that to fruition is, we're racing against the clock to ensure that's ready, especially in relation to the quarterback room we just talked about.
Last year, outside of maybe one or two guys or a handful of guys who followed you from New Mexico, the off-season regimen was totally new to everybody here. You've had the advantage of a lot of guys, a significant number, who know what's expected of them now. How are things different at this point in March, late March, compared to where they were in late March a year ago?
Yeah, I think that question, or that line of questioning, is really the separator in college football right now. The teams that can retain the majority of the players they wanted to retain. And so in our case, one player really that we were hopeful to stay and retain didn't stay. So then when you have the number of players back that you wanted to stay, that are the foundation of your team, we call that preserving the core, and then you stimulate progress around that. That's from Jim Collins in the book Good to Great, right? And man, when you do that, your reference point, certainly the new players are getting messaging from the coaching, but they're being led in the locker room from those that have been here, right? They're being shown and told, this is how we do things here. This is how we lift. This is how we run. What can we expect? This is what you wear. Hey, don't do that. This is going to be a strike. And so that culture is being passed on so fast. So rather than a year ago where every day was brand new, this now is right about 50% of the team that this is just the next version of. And so we're farther along. They're further along, which means the newcomers can be farther along. And I think that might be the most critical point in college football right now. And if you choose to replace roster players, if you can do that with starting players elsewhere that are coming with seasoning and experience and age, that turnaround is going to happen faster. The caveat to that is more experience means more money. And there's the unique part of college football right now.
Just a follow-up to that, it looks like there's a number of players who do have names on jerseys, have numbers assigned. Is that new? Is that carryover from last year? Or how is that different this year compared to last?
It's just a choice that I made. Usually I start the team brand new each year. I think the landscape is different. And I think year two for me is different. And I wanted to acknowledge those guys that stayed. And there is a difference because they have been here. They have been through an off season. They've been through a spring. They've been through 13 games. They've been through a bowl game. They've been through another off season. And I just thought that needed to be recognized. And so that's how I got to that point for this team.
I don't think I had a chance to ask about like the schedule where there's the flex game in the conference schedule. Just how's that for you as a coach, kind of seeing that where it's like you don't know who you're going to play, and just kind of your thoughts on that system as a whole?
Oh, I think there's mixed feelings probably from every coach. If they were to say what they really think, I think that would be mixed. I think everyone would prefer to have a known opponent. I think everyone would prefer to have another team in our conference with a known opponent. Now, knowing that's not the case, and I think it was a really creative, innovative, and exciting move by the Pac-12 to have something that is, and there's some intrigue there. There's kind of some traveling partner-ish kind of matchups that look to be the baseline, but where it goes from there, hard to say. And regarding the schedule, I've told our team, I think, and there might be historians at Utah State that have others that they would say rival this, but I think it's I just call it the most aggressive schedule in Utah State history. It's the Pac-12 is a really strong conference. Our non-conference games also very strong. And what that flex game looks like versus whom, that could possibly be another. And so, yeah, really exciting and challenging, and a great frame of reference to be practicing against, knowing that's what's coming.
And then just with scheduling, recently announced University of Utah extending a series with Utah State. Just your thoughts on that? You've got a long history with that program.
I think it's great for the state. I think it's great for Utah State. I think it's makes a lot more sense than traveling 2 time zones to play in a league that people don't really care about, and there's no natural rivalry. And for the University of Utah to come to Maverick Stadium and play football, what a great thing for Utah State, and for us to drive an hour away in the same time zone and play a game that has regional and significant meaning. I think it's good for college football. I think it makes a lot of sense.
And there's been a lot of talk with basketball right now with NIL and rev sharing. Obviously, the coaching changes kind of played into that. But with Utah State football and with recent gifts to the athletics department, where do you feel like Utah State is in terms of football with revenue sharing and NIL as compared to the rest of the Pac-12?
Man, I'm really excited. Our athletic director, as this transfer portal opened, it was, to be clear, 3 times higher than I thought it was going to open at. So if this was market value for current rosters, the transfer portal opened with players being valued 3 times higher than what I anticipated. I don't think anyone anticipated that level. It seems to be doing that each year. So I'm not sure where that's going to end, nor do I think it's sustainable, nor do I think that most fan bases have the appetite for it to keep doing that. What I credit our university for doing, that's our athletic director and our president, they're doing everything they can to support Utah State football, myself and our team, within reason of and reaching the goals that we have. And so, man, I feel really supported. Our team does, and I think we're doing a really nice job, and we're fiercely aligned, the president, the AD, and myself, on how to do it. And so I'm really excited about the future, and also what we're doing, but how we're doing it, which is quite different than the national landscape. And maybe at some point I'll talk about that, just not today.
So that was Utah State's football head coach Bronco Mendenhall talking about a bunch of different topics. We want to stay ahead of schedule, so we're actually going to be taking a quick break. We'll get to our reactions and our thoughts on some of the many things that were said by Mendenhall during that interview. So we'll have that coming up next here on the Full Court Press on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM The Fan, streaming online on YouTube at The Fan KLGN. Welcome back to the Full Court Press. Oh, the camera on the YouTube stream doesn't want to point at me. Hello, everyone. That's funny. I had to go like refill my water, and so these cameras are smart enough to follow you, and so they followed me halfway out the door, but forgot to pick me up when I came back. So you got a nice view of the cabinet over there when we restarted the stream.
Got its eye on you.
YouTube. Well, it didn't have its eye on me.
It wants to try to keep its eye on you.
Yeah, it tries, and then sometimes it's not very good at it.
Yeah.
But reminder, Saturday, April 4th from 10 to noon, it's the Young Power Sports Logan Easter egg hunt. Free family fun, 4 age groups, and a $100 golden egg in each of those age groups. Grab the kids and baskets to go over there. So it's April 4th, 10 to noon. Again, prizes and a whole lot more at Young Power Sports Logan. They're over on the kind of south end of Logan, over by the South Walmart. So go check them out. We had a couple, we had text and a YouTube chat come in. One kind of tying us back to our kind of show leading topic on the transfer portal. Iceman asking, will players have regrets later in life because they went and chased money hoping to get a bigger bag instead of just having a bag of money for 4 years at one school?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the biggest person to ask that, a couple players, Stephen Ashworth, left to go chase a bag.
I think he did all right, though.
He did, yeah.
Great off the ball.
He had success.
It depends, because, I mean, for one...
got a big bag, but I don't know that he had much more success going to Washington.
Because it depends, like, how well did you use that? Because that kind of bag can set you up for the rest of your life in a meaningful way and reduce a lot of stress and, in this economy. But there is also kind of the emotional aspect of, like, you go one place to get a big bag of money, but like maybe some relationships soured a little bit. Fan bases that you maybe not quite feel comfortable to come back to. Though Great Osborne was in the crowd at the NCAA tournament with the Aggie fans, so I don't think his relationship with Utah State fandom is ruined in that sense. I mean, heck, he was in the Spectrum for one game as well. So I think he's managed just fine. I'm sure there are players somewhere. I don't know if I can identify anyone specifically among former Aggies that would maybe like strictly regret leaving, but I'm sure that has happened to somebody. But another text we have coming in, 8632, saying the Robert and I experiment will either be a tremendous success or a horrible failure. Then adding Broncos wording on succession plan makes me believe, I'm talking about the quarterbacks, that it's Grady or McKay. Probably McKay. I'm still Team Maryland.
Yeah, if you try to read between the lines as to what Coach Mendenhall said there in our interview post-practice today, he certainly gives a lot of credit to McKay Hillstead as the more experienced quarterback in the group, and certainly is ahead of everybody else because he has a little bit more experience. But I don't know that that necessarily means he's going to be the front runner. I think that puts him in that position to be the new quarterback, the starting quarterback in late August. But he had good things to say about Brosterhouse, and there's these young freshmen coming in. So and there's still one freshman that we haven't even seen yet. He's not on campus yet. So listening to what he said, he certainly at this point, this stage, making note that the experienced quarterbacks are performing the best, which makes sense, but it's not necessarily set in stone. I think as the spring practices continue, the spring showcase will be interesting to see there who takes more snaps and who looks more refined, because they will have they will be on the inside track just to be the starting quarterback when fall camp gets going.
Yeah, I this is why I mentioned Hillstead, and I think I'm kind of one of the few people that's really kind of been in Grady Brosterhouse's camp, or Brosterhouse. I'm still not 100% sure how to say that name.
Yeah. But
I think it's those two. I know there's a lot of people who are really, promoting Caleb Maryland, and I get it. In some of the games I watched, one of the full games I was able to find of Caleb Maryland was one of his least statistical productive games. It was actually the 6A championship. It was one of his least statistically productive games. It was a 10-3 game, I think. So he wasn't throwing for a ton of yards. And even in that game where he wasn't really productive, I was still impressed by Caleb Maryland. let alone all the other. You look up his stats. He had really good stats throughout the year, throughout his whole career, really. So I get the hype for Caleb Maryland. I'm just not as much of a believer as far as this year, because I've said it before. I think McKay Hillstead is probably your most talented quarterback in the room. You can maybe make an argument that some of these incoming freshmen have as much talent. Brosterhouse doesn't quite have the arm talent as some of the others, but he has experience, and he's got pretty good athleticism in running. And McKay Hillstead, along with being arguably the most talented quarterback in the room, is the most experienced quarterback in the room. And that is a heck of a combination for anybody to be overcoming. And, Caleb Maryland, Brady Goodman, Grady Brosterhouse, Katcha Kearney, I think was the walk-on the Mendenhall mentioned. So, if you want to try and read between the lines, it sounds like it's McKay Hillstead. I don't know if Mendenhall was... how much Mendenhall was dancing around and how much he was kind of laying out there. But he talked about how McKay Hillstead, he's starting from a further position point, a further point up in this race because of his experience. And so, he said some of these other guys, if you're good enough, if Caleb Maryland truly is the guy, he'll make up that ground.
Right.
But I think right now, McKay Hillstead is kind of your assumed starter. They're figuring that out right now in spring ball. That's the stuff that they're figuring out. You talk about, Bronco Mendenhall said that, well, maybe before you wouldn't figure out quite as much, but with the transfer portal era kind of being what it is, spring ball, where you have a lot of your high school guys here, there aren't too many people that aren't, there's not a whole lot of people that are going to show up just for fall. About 80 to 90% of the roster is already here in spring, where it used to be a good chunk of your roster wouldn't show up until fall. So they have most of their roster. And most of the guys they expect to start because of the transfer portal are already here. So they're going to have most of that figured out by the time they hit fall. So but I think that Hillstead is going to have the inside track there.
Well, and when I look at this, group of quarterbacks, those that are here now, and certainly when you look include Goodman, who will come here in the summer, they're different. Like their body styles are different. Like how they play are a little bit different. And so, I think the other thing to consider is how is Utah State's offense going to operate this year, and whose quarterback style fits best in that. And granted, sometimes good coordinator will adjust to fit the strengths of his individual players, but you got a coordinator who's trying to get to know who these guys are too. So it's going to be a very different style. And based on what we've heard from Coach Mendenhall, he wants to go to definitely a more power situation where the quarterback is going to run the ball a lot.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because you mentioned the differences. You kind of have two different styles of quarterbacks. I don't know much about Katcha Kearney, his style at all. I've not really looked to him at all. But you have McKay Hillstead and Caleb Maryland, who are these smaller, though quick quarterbacks with good arm talent.
Yep.
But again, they're both
build.
small. Like
5'10", 5'11".
Yeah, Hillstead's 5'10". Maryland is 5'11", 6 foot. And so while they're athletic, they probably aren't the kind of guys you want to run a ton. They can run, but you don't want them to be running the ball every other run play. But then you have Grady Brosterhouse and Brady Goodman. These are bigger guys, 6'3", 6'4", 220 to 230 pounds. Those are guys that you could see being like 100-plus carry guys throughout the season. So
just physically able to move the chains themselves by going through guys, whereas Hillstead and Maryland have to go around guys. I mean, they're both kind of scrambling, running the ball is kind of still important among all of them, but the style of how they do that is different. Yeah,
the ability to run versus being a threat to run. That's kind of the difference, I'd say, there. We do need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation, continue getting our reactions. So we'll have that next here on the Full Court Press. Welcome back to the Full Court Press. Napa Auto Parts has batteries, headlights, wiper blades in stock and on sale now. They got locations from Preston all the way down to Providence, so go check them out. Air fresheners, shop towels, seafoam, and more. Chemical Guys car wash and detailing kits for only $49.99. So make sure to go check them out. Your locally owned Napa Auto Parts locations. A couple of texts rolling in. 8632 saying to Iceman's point earlier about players maybe having regrets. Saying Josh Aduje said the biggest regret he had was leaving. Words right out of his mouth. For him, that, obviously maybe a little more productive. And I think he ended up being sixth man of the year, but probably would have had.
He was sixth man at Utah State.
Oh, he was at Utah State.
And looked like it was going to be a similar role coming back, but he wanted an opportunity for a starting job, which he got at San Jose, but San Jose just didn't have the same level of.
They weren't very
production.
good.
Yeah.
And the Aggies obviously were rather successful in what would have been his senior year there.
Yeah.
So that's certainly one example for players. 9015 saying, where's Mason's new wife from? If they both have ties to the Valley and USU, it'd be pretty hard for him to leave for a different school. I have no clue where his wife is from.
I have no idea. There was another text, too, earlier. For the Pac, what style of quarterback would be best to win a championship?
One who can do their job really well. There's not
win
really
games. I don't know that there's one particular style that favors winning over the other. It's just if you're good.
The kind that
right
can
resources
get
around you.
The kind that can get the ball up and down the field.
Yep.
And there are a variety that can do that. Some that run the ball, like Bryson Barnes, was not a particularly great thrower, but he can move the ball up and down the field. Some are really great throwers, not great runners, but they get the ball up and down the field.
Yeah, because there's varying degrees of defenses and styles that they're going to run through in the Pac-12.
All right, that's going to do it for us in this first hour. Stay tuned and move over to YouTube. You should be able to find us there. All right, so we are back on YouTube. We kind of had a sprint out at the end there. Didn't have much time to say goodbye and tell people on the radio that they had to switch over to the YouTube stream. That'll be kind of the new norm whenever we have shortened radio segments, is when we get to the end of whatever radio segment we have or portion of our normal segment that we have, we'll have to switch over to YouTube only. Best way to keep this content going for you guys. But to kind of continue the discussion, although let's actually real quick get to a chat we have on the YouTube chat saying, when do you expect USU to make a decision on the new coach with the portal being open April 4th? He needs to be at work and have a staff. I thought the portal opened April 7th.
It's actually April 7th. I'm looking at a calendar here.
We have two calendars in here, Eric. There's one over there, and there's one.
See if there was one that was closer
right,
for my eyes.
I don't know if you're going to be able to see on that angle.
Yeah, so April 7th is a Tuesday. But yeah, it's that's regardless. I mean, of the point. The Utah State is trying to move quickly to get a head coach hired. There are coaching changes happening all over the country, and there are going to be more to come because dominoes are going to be falling based on some of these high-profile positions that are open. So Utah State wants to get their guy as soon as possible. So whether he has his whole staff or not, it's still to be determined. But usually they like to bring guys that were with them before. So yes, my guess, Jason, would be that a head coach would be named by as soon as the middle of next week. Yeah, I'd be surprised if they don't have their guys zeroed in by this weekend. But they're still going to have time to get them on campus, do some visits, with their committees, have them walk around the facilities and all that stuff. So it may take a minute still to get some of the stuff done. But my guess is that they're trying to zero in on that person as fast as they can.
Yeah, I think we're going to be hearing, unofficially official type reports by the weekend, official introductory press conferences by the middle of next week. That's not something that I'm hearing specifically that I'm reporting is going to happen. That is just based on my impression of how quickly these coaching searches have tended to happen recently for a lot of different teams, is that they can happen really quick. It happened really quick for Jared Calhoun. It did not take particularly long. And where the Aggies are going to have plenty of candidates to sort through, there's a lot of people who are going to want this job, a lot of good candidates who are going to want this job. And so I think Utah State, they're going to have the pick of the litter, and they're going to get it done pretty quickly. Part of that is going to be, wanting to get it done by the transfer portal, but it's also like trying to get the coach in place so that they can have as much of their staff, because that's a process that's going to take a little bit. You hire the head coach, and they take a week or so to get their full staff in. They want that whole picture, all the assistants, as much of the coaching staff as they can, because we talked earlier in the show about, Karson Templin and, many other athletes. That process of entering the portal is kind of an exploratory thing. They wait to talk to the head coach, and they want to see what the plan is for them. Well, if you're a player, you don't want it to just be the head coach, because assistant coaches, that's a really important, relationship for players, because a lot of times they're working with the assistant coach as much, if not more, than the head coach. So they want to know, what are the assistant coaches? What is their style? What do they bring? Where assistant coaches might be the, like an offensive and defensive coordinator. How does their style fit with mine? On the court, and then also just off the court relationship. Mm-hmm. So you want to have as much of that picture in place, assistants included, by the time the April 7th transfer portal opens, and sooner if you can manage it. And so
when Danny Sprinkle was hired, they all just holed up in some hotel rooms, and they were just working the phones and emails and video chats. They never left the hotel room because they were slammed hard trying to build a roster. Get guys to see if guys would follow them from Montana State, find other guys here at Utah State to stay, find other guys to complement what they had, what they needed. So yeah, it behooves Cam Walker and the Utah State administration to find their candidate sooner rather than later.
Yeah. 9315 saying the longer you wait with all the coaches being fired, would that not put USU in a bidding war with other schools that need coaching? Yeah, you think NC State, they fired they lost their head coach. They didn't fire him.
Yeah.
Will Wade left, and we were talking about Takayo Siddle, the UNC Wilmington. That's a guy who was a former assistant at NC State, North Carolina man through and through. He may no longer be in the race to be Utah State's head coach, largely because of that, because he may want the NC State job and may very well get it.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of situation, or, the ripple effect from, the North Carolina job opening up. Not that any of Utah State's candidates are going to get hired to North Carolina, but the coach that loses their coach to UNC, and then maybe the coach after that loses their coach to the one who lost theirs to UNC. That ripple effect could eventually land in the sphere where Utah State is hiring from. So you want to try and get it done as soon as possible. Mind that there's still the old adage, what's done well is done quickly enough. So you still want to do the job well.
Right.
But this is still kind of a rush order.
Yeah, you don't want to rush into something just to get something. Yeah. Utah State, as we've talked about before, has a process that they have followed. They need to continue to follow that. They shouldn't feel rushed to make a decision here. They have some time, but they don't have a lot of time. So I have faith in their process and the people that they have in place to make those decisions. I like that the players are involved in that process. They get to have a say as to the type of coach that they think would be successful, and so their voices have value and have merit. So who it will be, we still don't know. Who are they looking at? Who are they interviewing? We don't know. But the process is happening, and they are already reaching out to agents and making contact and receiving resumes and sifting through those right now.
Yeah. So that's something we expect to be getting done in the very near future. One thing I wanted to pull back to was something that Bronco Mendenhall mentioned. There's a couple of different things we can touch on again. We talked about the quarterback battle and his comments there. But one thing I thought was interesting, especially where I'd kind of thrown this on the topic docket, so to speak, was the increase in players' NIL, their salary, essentially the cost of players. Evan Mia, part of his what he offers on his website, because he has advanced analytics, but he also markets some tools for coaches and athletics department. Part of that is, you can look at players in the portal and have an estimated, NIL. You can't see that unless you sign up for like a really expensive package. Otherwise, I'd tell you some of those numbers.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you right now, this company ain't paying for that, and I ain't paying for that. So I can't tell you those exact numbers, but he did share that at least the estimated cost of players, we don't know quite yet what those will be. But according to his formulas, the estimated cost is up 33 or 35% this is for basketball players. And so the cost of players, so while Utah State is working to increase their NIL and revenue share budget, their NIL budget from what it's been into their revenue share budget to anything above zero, the cost of players is going up. So these $2.5 million gifts, they've gotten a couple of them in the last couple of months. That is something that certainly helps. It's more than what they'd gotten. It establishes some growth. But there is almost kind of a worry of, well, everybody else is also getting, there are a lot of programs that are getting record-setting funding, and their donors are donating more and more. And there's more revenue streams that everyone is doing. So there is a bit of a worry that Utah State, while they're generating more revenue, are they truly catching up? Because they go from a $2.4 million roster to they're hoping like a $4 or $5 or $6 million roster. Well, is everyone else going from a $10 million roster to a $15, $16, $17 million roster?
Yeah.
That's kind of the worry is, are you actually catching up with all this fundraising? And that's the thing that we're going to have to see over these next few years. If Utah State truly does make up ground with this, like everyone else is growing, but is Utah State growing faster than everyone else? That's going to be a big key. And it ties to what Bronco was talking about with looking at the transfer portal. His idea of what everything was going to cost was like a third of what it ended up being. Like the cost of players was three times
more
what he was expecting, which fell in line, or of course it was kind of worse than what basketball may be seeing. And honestly, we might see that in basketball because Evan Mia's 35% growth is an estimation. It may end up being 3 times the value for basketball players than what people are expecting, like it seemingly was according to Bronco Mendenhall in football, where the players he was going after cost 3 times as much. So he probably wasn't able to get as much in the portal as he was expecting.
Yeah. Well, and when we talked to him in February, those players who had like certified experience, like legitimate snaps, they were asking way more than those who didn't have much experience. And that's how it's going to continue to rise. If you have somebody who comes in and they have opportunities to play and they start to get some experience, legitimate experience, they're going to go on the open market and command a lot of money. We're seeing that some of the top players at Utah Valley announcing their intentions to enter the portal.
Oh, they're just being
and they, you know what, can't fault them. I mean, they just had back-to-back great seasons, won a lot of games, but there was a couple of guys that, you know, a high mid-major or a power conference school would like to have someone like that because they have legitimate experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have like those guys. Like I was going to say, Utah Valley has kind of almost become a farm for high major teams to pick their players. Mind you, few of them end up having success. But like they keep sending players. You know, Carter Welling. They sent someone to Iowa State. I still can't remember his name. They sent a kid to TCU. They got 2 guys that are going to go transfer to high majors this year.
Yeah.
So like they keep, because those guys are going to get paid, like, and they're worth a lot of money because of the experience and production they have. And you see that in football where Utah State added players with experience and production. And that costs money. Like you, when you bring in guys who don't have a whole lot of experience, don't have a whole lot of production, they can't demand a whole lot because they are essentially a risk. And so you don't end up having to pay them a ton of money. Like, you know, MJ Collins didn't cost a ton of money for Utah State to bring in because he didn't have a whole lot of leverage.
Right.
And so you get a lot of value out of him because of that. But if you want to bring in a player who's got, you know, you look at these mid-major players that are now transferring, a lot of Aggie fans saying, hey, we want this player, you know, who's a mid-major player who's had a lot of production. Well, that guy is going to cost multiple millions of dollars because of that experience and production. And so that's kind of where it's happening in both, well, at all levels where there's money being thrown around.
Yeah,
but
Utah State
men's basketball and football especially.
Yeah, Utah State's had a lot of success in both football and basketball, finding those players who were initially recruited by power programs, struggled to find their place in the regular rotation, and they're looking for that opportunity to play. They're looking for that opportunity to showcase what they can do. And Utah State will have the benefit of them getting training and nutrition and everything else from these other higher programs, and come to Utah State where they get to showcase what they can do. And most often that's worked out really well for Utah State. There's a few cases here or there where there are reasons why those guys never saw the field or never saw the court.
Yeah.
But by and large, Utah State's been able to weed those guys out and find quality players who just want to play. And they're able to finally get on the court and showcase what they're really good at. And that's more of how Utah State needs to continue in the future. Because if you're just going out and find somebody at a low major or another mid-major who's had good numbers, that player is going to ask for and demand a lot more money than the player that was somewhere else that just never got that opportunity and just looking for a chance to play.
Yeah, and a lot of times those guys don't end up panning out as well as you think they might.
Yeah, right.
That happens a lot. Like even from
but you start to throw them in against a higher level of competition, they sometimes don't always stand the test.
Yeah, low major to even mid, like you talk about low major, mid major to high major, but the transition from low major to mid major isn't always super smooth. I can think of 3 players who haven't translated super well. You know, Nigel Burris barely played. Tucker Anderson struggled. Gary Clark did end up being solid in the end, but if you were expecting him to average 11 and 7, you didn't get that from him.
Right.
You got 6 and 3.
True. Yeah.
So that's something you got to kind of temper your expectations. If you sign a guy who averaged 9 points and 8 rebounds at a low major school, you're probably going to get 6 and 5 out of him. They don't always elevate statistically, even in the move up.
So that's why this Show Me initiative, I think, is so important for Utah State. Trying to raise a certain amount of money before they even start into the Pac-12, and then they have other goals. You know, after being in the Pac-12 their first full season, they're a quarter of the way there in their fundraising, at least in the 2 major donations. I don't know about the aggregate for everything else, but they want to get to $20 million in cash and pledges by August 1st. That's a lot of money.
It is.
But they're a quarter of the way there. They only have $5 million on the books.
Yeah, and that's from 2 groups, individuals, pairs, I don't know. 2 people, essentially.
2 people, yeah.
Have donated a quarter of that. So a lot of other Aggie fans will be contributing to that as well. I want to get to this text from 9315 talking about kind of the inflation of of player costing. Will this be sustainable with the price tag of NIL going up in 1 year? This feels like a huge inflation risk or rate. And yeah, I think like with spending and with NIL overall, like
the short answer is no, it's not sustainable.
It's not. And the question really ends up being like, we are seeing this enormous inflation in spending. And right now, like with Utah State, we're seeing them dip as far as they can into the pockets of donors, asking for millions in gifts that they've typically not really gotten, or at least if they have gotten them, it's been many years in between. And like they've gotten $2.5 million gifts in a span of a couple weeks. And, we're seeing, high major schools, power conference schools with, massive spending. Some of them are tens of millions in the red.
Look what LSU has done.
Yeah.
I consider the coaches that they've fired, buyouts for the coaches that they're bringing in. They did that for football. They just did it again for basketball. Like, I don't know where LSU's getting all this money because they are just dropping millions of dollars left and right.
Well, weren't we like $100 or $200 million in football coach buyouts last year?
That's insane.
So, and you look at Kentucky, how much they paid to buy out John Calipari out of his contract and stuff
then,
like that.
And then poured, $22 million on their roster, and what do they have to say for it?
Yeah, not nearly as much as they were hoping. So the question just really is, how deep are these donors' pockets? Because that's where everyone is going, is to donors. Because, they are trying to find all these new creative revenue streams, basically NIL, revenue share fees on tickets. Utah State going with luxury seating, like even conference are trying to generate more revenue with luxury seating and stuff like that. And so how deep are those pockets? But another thing is like, it's going to be able to be strung along a little bit more because as we've talked about, viewership for football and basketball is still on an upward trajectory. So the money is still going to be increasing for there. There's not a bubble bursting in the TV money. And mind you, that's where most of the money is fueling a lot of these places.
TV rights.
Is these massive TV rights. So, and the money they get from the playoff and all these different things. So while there is kind of a certain breaking point for donors' pockets, there is also a factor of there's still more money to be got, both by all these different, call them creative or, essentially wringing their fans dry type of money streams. So the question is, how quickly do these new revenue streams dry up? How quickly do the donors get sick of donating ever increasing amounts of money? Do they get sick of that? Is there an upper limit on that? And at what point does the TV bubble potentially burst? So if you're looking at when does all this spending finally come under control, look at those three areas. When do those three revenue streams stop going on an upward trajectory? Because they are all on an upward trajectory right now. They're all heading up. There is more money to be gained through through these creative revenue streams, the new ways of selling merchandise and generating revenue in some way or the other. There's still more money to be had out of, high rolling donors. And there's still more money to be had out of TV. So it's going to keep going up and up and up and up. And it's when do those three areas finally wind down? That's when the bubble bursts. That's when we reach a peak. I don't know how long it's going to take. My first gut was 5 to 10 years, but with TV deals kind of still going up and things like that, it could be 10, 15 years. But we'll just see.
Yeah, because you're finding schools that go from, and I think it's, Colin Cowherd talks about this. You go from the schools that have like the car dealership guy who's your big donor, and that would sustain you for a while. But now we're getting into an era where you need a $1 billion benefactor.
Yeah,
who can drop a couple million out of his couch and not really blink an eye. And to really compete at the highest level, it's moved into another realm, and so it's going to reach a breaking point where UTEP just sent out their AD an email to its donor base and its fans saying, yeah, you know what, we struggle to compete, and we're moving into the Mountain West, and the demands are going to be higher on us. We need everybody's help. we've really struggled, and it's going to be hard for us to still be on that level. So we need everybody to buy in, and everybody from the whole El Paso community needs to come together. And so it's like there are schools that are just going to have to raise up their hands. Like we can't keep pace with this.
Yeah. So you're going to see the kind of mid-majors and low majors, your group of five and your mid-major conferences, they're going to drop out of this arms race a lot sooner, where they can't really, they've bled their donor base dry. They've wrung every last penny out of it.
Yep.
The TV rights aren't going to be paying any more money at that point for mid-major. They're not going to be inflating those numbers. And maybe that's where that aspect may be the trigger point for the power conferences to try and break off. Because again, they are going to chase the dollar to the very last, and they will make any sacrifice. They'll make any move, screw tradition, the love of the game, your fan base, everything. They will throw everything out the door and under the rug and under the bus before they give up the chase for the dollar. These aren't people who are thinking about the state of the game 30, 40 years from now. They're thinking about next year's balance sheet.
Yes.
So they are going to make every one of those decisions based off of keeping this financial scheme going. And so it just depends, how long until the bubble bursts. It lasts until the creativity of the SEC and Big Ten commissioners finally falls off. They will run into a wall that they cannot climb with whatever creative funding they try. So how long that takes, how long until the mid-majors have to drop out of that, we'll see. It might be, as we talk about, it may sound like bleak. I don't know if it'll be as bleak as maybe we're sounding it like it'll be, but it's going to be a really interesting next 20 years. Seeing how college sports tries to maintain its lucrative lifestyle as it slowly runs out of runway.
Well, and just the pressure remains on schools like Utah State, Boise State, San Diego State to compete at a high level now because, man, you really want to get that invite. If you can be part of the club, you're in, you're set. Oregon State, Washington State thought they were part of the club, and they got left behind.
They were part of the club
because they weren't doing their part. Otherwise, they would have received an invite. They got lax. They just got fat on somebody else's work, and they weren't actually doing hard work themselves. And so they didn't illustrate their value that often. And so, that's why it's these next 4 or 5 years before that next media rights deal comes up and realignment could happen once again. Schools like Utah State, Washington State, Oregon State, the schools in the Pac-12 and even some of those in the Mountain West, it's so important that they compete at a high level right now so they can be part of what happens next, hoping that they can be part of that exclusive group that helps take care of a lot of other things for the future.
So speaking of the next few years and kind of this immediate future, some news for the Pac-12. Their athletic director, Scott Barnes, will be retiring. Some are saying he's being fired. Whatever it is, he is essentially transitioning into retirement. He will be staying on until they find a new AD, at which point they will move to that new AD.
Well, there is a date. He'll be there through the end of August.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they'd said.
And then he'll stay on as an advisory role for another year. Through 2027 to help in that transition with everything going on in the Pac-12. So with that, it sounds more like maybe he's more stepping away than he's being fired, but clearly the two sides got together and like this isn't working out.
Yeah, I'm not really super plugged in to Oregon State athletics, but from the few people that I follow and some of the rumblings that I've seen, there are some people who are dissatisfied with Scott Barnes in particular. But even if, there are people who aren't upset at Scott Barnes, there are people who are obviously not happy with where Oregon State athletics is right now, at least in regards to the performance of their football and basketball teams. Their basketball team hasn't been bad, but it's maybe not been where it could be, and their football program certainly hasn't been where it needed to be.
No, but yeah, he's stepping down, but they're in the midst of they've made a coaching change for basketball,
for football too, I think.
Yeah, for football too, and so he's definitely still leaving his stamp on the future of Oregon State, but it's been murky. He was there when they did some significant renovations of the football stadium. When the baseball team won the national championship, but it was also part of this really bad NIL deal that they did with this third party. That was a whole mess. He mishandled several things with the image of the university, with the Pac-12. Really said some things that were off-putting to a lot of Oregon State fans, that put them down. So it's been rocky for Scott Barnes, especially the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I think with the state of Oregon State overall, like as we've talked about the future of the Pac-12, as we've looked at the strength of the schedule and all these different things in football and basketball, we have often noted, and Washington State is kind of included in this, how the Pac-12 survivors, the remaining Pac-12 schools, don't actually look like they're going to be the banner-carrying schools. I think that's the image they want to project.
Yeah.
Like that we are going to carry on the legacy of the Pac-12 and we are lifting up.
We're a Pac-12
schools.
Legacy and everybody else is a second tier.
Yeah. And that doesn't really look like it's going to be the case.
No.
In football, you're going to see teams like Boise State carrying the banner for the Pac-12. In basketball, it's going to be Gonzaga, San Diego State, Utah State. Like they're going to be the ones leading the way in NCAA tournament appearances. Obviously, ideally, Gonzaga is going to be the kind of program that appears in the Elite Eight, Final Four, with a Pac-12 crest on their jersey. So where's Washington State and Oregon State? Those are your schools with the biggest budgets. I know they're kind of having to maybe transition to slightly smaller budgets from $100+ million to, 80, 85 million. But those are supposed to be your top schools, your most well-funded, your schools with the history that some of the incoming schools don't necessarily have as much of, or at least they don't have the history of being in a conference like the Pac-12. Oregon State and Washington State are not holding up their end of the bargain as far as the kind of program that you need the Pac-12 schools to be as we're heading in. Like they're looking like they're going to be one of the bottom feeders.
Yeah.
And that can't be happening. If the Pac-12 experiment is going to work, Oregon State and Washington State have to live up to being one of these Pac-12 holdovers. They have to be two of the best, 4 or 5 programs in there. They can't be the bottom feeders.
No.
Because
can't.
You need, because at that point you might as well have just merged the Pac-12 and the Mountain West.
Right.
But if you get the better versions of Oregon State and Washington State, then everything works. Everything works well because essentially at that point, you don't really have bottom feeders. You just have teams that happen to be at the bottom of the conference in any given year. Like maybe Texas State ends up being that, but who knows? They're a growing program. They may end up, if
right.
Oregon State and Washington State aren't careful, Texas State may surpass them.
Yeah, very, very possible.
Where they're a program trying to be on the up and up, and once they get a little bit more money in their coffers and get fundraising, is obviously their fan base is excited about joining the Pac-12, so they're doing big fundraising. Like you don't want them to just immediately surpass those two schools. So Oregon State, whether or not you want to pin all of the Beavers' problems on Scott Barnes, at the very least, getting new leadership may certainly help. Where they need a facelift, they need to be making a big jump in at least your two revenue sports. I mean, baseball has certainly done well enough.
Yes,
I don't know much about any of their other sports, but with football and basketball, these money-making sports, the sports that are the big reason for this change, they need to be making massive jumps in those areas.
Yeah. So it's the challenges are real in Corvallis and in Pullman. They've always been in smaller markets that really resemble more of what exists in the Mountain West, but they've been legacy members in the Pac-12 and just have benefited from that Brinks truck that backs up every year with Pac-12 money and TV money and bowl money, and just drops it on their doorstep without having to do anything. And they've become so reliant on that. These last couple of years have been really hard for them. They just haven't known how to, scrape and scratch and crawl for every little nickel and dime like a lot of schools like Utah State have been doing for decades. And so they're more well positioned to compete and exist in this environment. So don't envy it, but interesting to see where they go now that Scott Barnes is stepping down. He's been there a long time.
Yeah.
And so it's probably time. There's been enough, especially lately, that have been a real struggle for Oregon State. So it's time for him to move on.
Yeah. A couple of texts, and then I think there was one on the YouTube chat. Then we'll go over to Pick Six, and then we will go ahead and end the show after that. But so on the stream, Iceman with a couple more chats here saying, will you see people like Bobby Wagner step in and step up for donations to help schools like USU? Would they not money to help? I mean, those guys like Bobby Wagner, Jordan Love, those kind of players. I mean, Sam Merrill and Lemia Chiketa getting more money of late. Like those are donations that can help. But keep in mind that while those individuals are obviously rich, richer than I'll ever be, and they have money to give, and I believe a lot of them are giving. Like we've heard some of the gifts that Sam Merrill has made in various ways. So they are giving, and they're giving some of their time and literal money. They're rich, but they're not mega rich on the scale like Eric you were talking about, where there are people who can donate a lot of money, but the kinds of money we're talking about is the $1 billion, the billionaires, the people who have money coming out their ears. That if there's a bundle of $100 bills on the sidewalk, it is not even worth their time for them to bend over and pick it up.
I mean, all donations help. And certainly there have been attempts in the past to warm relations with some of these guys. But I know that they got cool with some of the people handling fundraising at Utah State in the past. I don't know what went down. Apparently it didn't go over very well. But I know that there's been efforts to kind of smooth things over.
Yeah. Well, with
you also have like Bobby Wagner, he's going to come and be a commencement speaker.
Yeah, so I think
there's things that are going on to deepen the relationship with these guys. And it's not just to hope that you get a paycheck donation in the future. It's to keep them connected to the institution that helped them get their start.
Yeah. I think since there was that talk about the relationships not being very good, I think since we've had a lot of leadership changes since then, a lot of that has probably been water under the bridge, so to speak. At least I would hope.
Yeah.
You never like to see relationships like that sour, setting aside monetary donations and all that. But yeah, like their money will help, and is probably being relied upon. I bet a lot of those people have given money, those people that have gone on to have success in the pros. But if we're talking about the end point where we run out of money, like, Utah State's going to run out of really, really rich donors before the bigger schools, obviously, even though that kind of money is something that will help Utah State try and catch up, or at least maybe exceed some of the mid-major peers.
Well, and stuff with transfer stuff too. You talk about loyalty to a program. Like these players, like the people who brought them here oftentimes aren't here anymore, or they've gone on to different things. And how well connected are they, or how well do they remain respected in the community? So I think those things matter, because some of those guys mean a lot to them. And does the community still hold them in high regard, and they feel like they're still respected? So I'm sure that they're making efforts to have connections with guys like Robert Turbin and Bobby Wagner and Sam Merrill and Lemia Chiketa. I couldn't tell you if they've donated or how much, but I know that they've made pitches. Yeah. And they're trying to keep if nothing else, just to keep them connected with the university, because that makes it a much easier ask.
8632 on the text line saying, we asked Bobby for so much money he got annoyed and stopped saying USU in his Sunday Night Football intro. Relations are much better with him now, though.
Yeah,
I would probably get annoyed too. Like if the only thing you ever asked me for was like, more money, please, more money. It's like, okay, I get it, but like,
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I get, since I got an associate's degree at Utah State, they treat me like an alum and ask me for money, especially when I did like a virtual 5K. I know it's shocking looking at me that I could ever run a 5K, although run a 5K is a stretch. It's usually run walk. But I think I paid $25, and that got me on their donor list for like 3 years. Really big donor, Jason Walker here. Where that one time,
high roller, baby.
High roller. I gave him $25 so I could run walk on a treadmill, because this was during COVID. That's why it was a virtual 5K. So
1818 on the text line. I laugh at fans who are jumping at Karson, saying he's going to follow his coach. Which coach are we talking here? Odom, Sprinkle, or Calhoun?
Yeah, that's
track.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Is like, yeah.
He's played for a lot of coaches.
There's 3 different coaches he could follow. There's probably a room for him at Virginia, Washington, and Cincinnati to go be likely a 6th man with each one of them, but like an energy 6th man, like that. It'd be a very similar role to what he's doing now.
Yeah, all those coaches were very familiar.
Yeah.
With Karson Templin.
So that's somewhere. Yeah, it is kind of funny. Like all the Cincinnati fans saying, "Yep, he's coming here." It's like, I don't know, man.
Well, there seems to be a large contingent of BYU fans who believe he's also going to Provo.
Yeah, BYU fans think every single Utah State player who enters the portal is going to BYU. I'm not sure I can remember any player.
When's the last time that happened?
I don't think there's been a player who's entered the portal, like in the portal era. I don't think any of them have gone to BYU. I know they really wanted Stephen Ashworth. He didn't go there, and that was a kid who went to Lone Peak. He was in BYU's backyard.
He was a Utah County kid.
Yeah, and he went to Creighton instead. Although again, he had a pretty successul career at Creighton in those 2 years. So let's shift over to pick 6 as we begin transitioning toward the end of our show here.
Yeah, because I got to go.
Yeah, you got to go. I've only come up with 2 of my 3, and I think I'm supposed to come up with a tiebreaker too.
Oh yeah, you won.
So I will really quickly try and come up with these while you list off yours.
All right, let's do this. The Boozer brothers, they are playing for Duke, and Duke takes on St. John's in the Sweet 16. So combined for both Boozer brothers, Caden and Cameron, points, rebounds, blocks, assists, and steals. So the 5 positive statistical categories, those 2 brothers combined in their game against St. John's, 50.5.
50 in it.
50.5 combined points, rebounds, blocks, assists, and steals between the 2 brothers.
I have no clue what the other brother averages. I'm just going to say under.
Okay, I'm going to take the over. St. Louis Battlehawks take on the DC Defenders with the UFL kicking off this weekend.
I was about to say, which sport is this?
No, I didn't see any published lines. I didn't look too deep. So I'm just picking this. I'm just throwing this out here. St. Louis over DC. The Battlehawks over the Defenders by 3.5.
I'll take the over.
Okay. I'm also going to take the over.
All right.
And then runs scored by the Chicago Cubs. They opened today against Washington. Didn't really go their way. But see if they can turn things around on Saturday and Sunday. So combined runs scored by the Chicago Cubs in their series against the Washington Nationals. Again, this is Saturday and Sunday. Runs specifically to Chicago, 7.5.
I'll take the over.
Okay, I'm going to take the under.
All right. Okay, so I've got 3 of them, and I'll need to come up with a tiebreaker really quick here. But let's start with this. The lowest seed, as in the highest number, in the Elite 8, over under 8.5.
Ooh, you've got 1-9 and 1-11.
Essentially, yeah.
So I don't think there's any more than
this
that.
Is basically
there's also a 6.
This is basically a will Texas or Iowa make the Elite 8 question.
I'm going to take the. So if I say over,
that means
like
over
9 or more.
Yeah, that would be Texas or Iowa making it.
I'm going to take the under.
The under? I'm going to take the under as well. I can see the scores right now. These games are happening as we speak.
Yeah, that's true.
Texas actually has a chance. So they're within 3. Iowa's down 12-4 though. Ace Bailey points against Denver. This is a game tomorrow. Over under 20.5 points. Just points.
I'm going to take the over.
I'm going to take the under. And then Arizona minus 7.5 over Arkansas. Although based on my chicken scratches, you could almost argue that says Alabama, but they're playing Arkansas.
I'm going to take Arizona.
All right. I'm going to take Arizona as well. Arizona's pretty good. Then I got to come up with a tiebreaker. Let's see. Let's pick an NHL one. Let's see. Well, let's see. Capitals and Mammoth actually play tonight at 7 p.m. So let's say Mammoth by 0.5 goals. Mammoth are 37, 29, and 6. Capitals are 35, 28, and 9. Although I should mention, Utah is doing terrible at home recently, and it is at home.
They've given up a lot of goals here recently. But they only have a few games left for the playoffs, so I'm going to go with the Mammoth.
All right. I'm going to go with the Capitals.
All right.
I'm going to be the pessimist. Oh, I guess I have to. It's a tiebreaker.
There's no choice.
I don't get a choice at all.
Yeah, it's a tiebreaker.
So there we go. That's pick 6, and that will pretty much do it for us on today's, I guess, extra portion, our bonus second hour, second 40 minutes. Thank you so much for joining us, and make sure to tune in tomorrow. It'll be much the same, about an hour of normal radio over the air, and then as much content as we have left over. We will do that during the 5 o'clock hour. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.